And then he picked up the other stick. And then he started to play really quiet. And then he started to play around and around. And he played for 40 minutes. And it got to as though that a hurricane had entered the room all by himself. And that was Elvin Jones. I had no idea. I didn't know what he looked like. And it just, here was a guy that was at the very pinnacle of the jazz world. For some reason, he must have had a night off and tried to make $100. But I had watched him approach the drums and play them as though he had never seen or heard a drum set before. And that really made a remarkable change in me. And it was just after that I opened a show for B.B. King at the Queen Elizabeth. That would have been 71, 72, a couple of years later. And I was blown away. His band was Sonny Freeman on drums and his brother Bobby Freeman. The band was out of Detroit. They're called Sonny Freeman and the Unusuals. And that was B.B. King's orchestra. And I watched them play. And that was the best B.B. King band ever, in my opinion. That was the real peak. And I was blown away with the show. And I'm sitting in a dressing room with him. I'll take a picture off the wall and show it to you in a minute of that night. Many years later, got him to sign it. But I said, well, you sang Sweet Little Angel tonight. And you made it sound fresh. And I know you've been doing that for 15 years now. And how did you do that? And he said, well, son, there may be somebody out there in the audience that doesn't know what a B.B. King is, and I'm here to tell them. Here, let me get this picture. I don't know if this will up, but this is actually the night backstage. Let's see if I can get this to appear.
Yeah, no, I can see it. Wow.
So that's me with my long hair. That's the dressing room at the Queen Elizabeth. And BB is sitting with a pink and peach polyester double knit leisure suit. And he's holding a piece of Kentucky Colonel fried chicken in his hand. And you can see the bucket. And there's the bottle of stubby old Vienna beer in the background. So you can really date it. And I'm asking him that question. And afterwards, he gave me a personalized guitar pick, which I kept for decades. And we wound up being pretty close because we wound up playing so many shows together. I played the Commodore with him a bunch, and I played, what was that called there, that like the Sheraton 500 in North Vancouver had a big jazz bar, not the one on Robson, the one just across the Lionsgate. We played shows with him there. I interviewed him for TV and I interviewed him for radio, and we had a very long relationship. And in fact, his drummer, later on, Tony Coleman, wound up playing with Powder Blues for a while. And Tony and I, TC Coleman, he's very famous, we're still in touch. So yeah, BB changed me. What were you talking about? I had to go to that story to talk about beginner's mind. And we were talking about that. And I think that's how I've approached everything. I approached radio. That's what we were talking about, radio and my relationship with radio. And so I was very naive. I knew it was time. The band was tight. I thought, well, let's make an album. And so we went in and made the first album in, I think, 3 days, mostly live off the floor, a few overdubs. And then I thought, well, what the heck am I going to do with this? I went out to Praise Records in Burnaby, that at the time was just doing church music, gospel music, and pressed some copies. And then somehow through someone, I forget who, down at that was at Total Sounds West on 12th and Vine. That was across from the old Carling O'Keefe Brewery. In the basement there, we had a little studio. And I got a list of FM radio stations. And I remember sitting on the floor with a magic marker and manila envelopes and putting the first album in there with a little note saying, could you play this? That's how naive I was. I had no idea. I didn't know there were promo men. I knew nothing. And in fact, some of those stations started playing it and they were getting a big reaction from it. And people couldn't figure out why, because it was not typically what was being played on the air at that time. I think Sweet Little Girl was the first thing that broke on Fox, which was not a single. And then I think Doing It Right broke. And then that album, I was pressing the album at Praise Records. I think it pressed 40,000 copies. before we got a distribution deal. And I remember the guys that praised, I think they were, Ukrainians or something, nice pair of brothers. And they had never pressed any more than a few hundred copies of anything. And I had their presses working night and day. And I remember one of them, they liked me. I was always paying them in cash. And one of them came to me and said, in a very heavy accent, well, why is this record selling? Are there dirty words on it?
It's funny.
I don't know what to tell you though. Yeah, I said, no, it's blues music. But
yeah, I thought what you were doing was perfect for where we were, what we were doing. Certainly for FM radio, which was a brand new medium in those days, and we really did get to play what we wanted from thousands of albums and fresh tracks and lots of brand new music like yours.
Well, you were helping Local X too. I mean, you had Six Cylinder on the radio. You had the Wild Root Orchestra on the radio. I think that there was some support at that point where you still had a little bit of freedom to be able to do that.
It's funny because you were trying to figure out the music business and we were trying to figure out radio. It was a brand new ball game. There were no formats. There were a handful of radio stations in Canada and North America, in most of the major cities. And we experimented with all this new music that was being written and produced, and it was just a wonderful time to be in radio.
And that spilled over in radio to other stuff. I remember they had this weatherman in San Francisco that came on like it was really high, and people would drive off the road listening to him. We go, "Wow, man, it's going to be hot today, man!" Like. And when that heat comes and it's coming through the windows and it's shining on your body, and then your muscles relax, man. This would be like the weather report, right?
That was fun. This radio program and podcast is called The Conversation Lab. My name is Don Schaefer, and today we're speaking with Tom Lavin of the Powder Blues Band, who are doing a special fundraising tribute for CFRO Co-op Radio on May 15th at the Rio Theater, and tickets are available at the riotheater.ca. Sorry, riotheatertickets.ca. So what's the Powder Blues Band today? What's changed?
That's a funny thing too, because way back when, in the very beginning, they said, well, what's the point of this? And I said, to me, it's sort of blues is like the trunk of the tree of Western music, and it encompasses jazz and swing and bop and rhythm and blues and all kinds of stuff. And what appeals to me is that it leaves room for a lot of improvisation, and certainly Powder Blues set's always been based on that. And to this day, the soloists don't know who I'm going to point at, and it's sort of fun, like occasionally I'll point at the tenor player and let him play a few choruses, and then I'll turn to the drummer and say, stop playing, and I'll go over and just play one-on-one with the sax player to see what happens. And sometimes it flops, and sometimes it's very exciting. So yeah, we're playing a lot of the same tunes, but to me it's almost like you use the same mantra, but your meditation is always different. It's like standing in front of the magic mountain and saying, open sesame. You try one song, mountain doesn't open. You try another song, bingo. You're in the den of thieves looking at a bunch of riches. That's how I see music.
And you always played with some amazing players.
I always tried to play with guys that were better than me, and that wasn't hard, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, I think you sell yourself a little short there.
And that's another thing that's neat. It's like, I go on stage with Bill Runge. Bill's been in a band since 81. That's how long is that? Like 41 years or something? And I've watched him over those 40 years and listened to his solos. I try to listen to every single note. And he has grown so much as a musician. And as he's grown, I've tried to keep up or to stretch, and that stretches me. So maybe they're old friends, but the conversation is always colored with growth, for lack of a better word. And all my guys are like that. I mean, the guys I play with are masters. They play far higher than me, but they always giving me something to aspire to, and that's great. maybe I kicked them around with a little energy, you know.
I seem to recall that you were always one of the hardest working bands in show business. You were always on the road. You played everywhere in BC, every little nook and cranny, every bar, every club, and you went across the country. You played in the U.S. How has that changed?
1981 was the peak of touring. I think if I had to do it again, I would have toured a lot less and spent a lot more time in the studio. But finances being the way they were, we were just driven to do that. And, it was when you're touring like that, you get some bad habits.
Yeah.
It was very hard in terms of drinking and sniffing and all the, having to live in buses and planes. That's tough. I think 1981 was the workingest year, and we did 323 different shows in a calendar year, and that was pretty heavy. I've done so many other things in the intervening years, but I've always kept the band alive. So yeah, we've got a show in May at the Rio for the Co-op Radio benefit, and then we've got 4 shows, high ticket shows at the Blue Frog in June, and then I think we're headlining Peach Fest in August, and then we're headlining the Trois Rivières Blues Festival in Quebec late in August. And I mean, there's this and that. I can't think of all the dates. I'm really fortunate because I'm one of those musicians that has done some other things that have created some economic freedom for me. So I do this because I really like it, not because I have to, not because I got to flog a dead horse. So anyone that sees me on stage knows I'm there because I still really get off on this. I love to hang with the guys and play music and see if we can make it happen. It's not the only thing I've done over those intervening years.
So, not wanting to get too personal, but do you mind sharing what you've done?
Well, there was all kinds of things came up. Like I said, my hobby was always reading science and technology. And so for a while in the 80s, I guess, I started consulting to Howe Street for venture capitalists. And so they'd get a white paper on some invention and wanted to know whether there was any validity towards doing a public stock offering and what the chances of success might be. And so I could read those technical papers, and then I guess my only gift was being able to put them into street language that a broker could understand. Brokers at that time, most of their depth was they'd look at your watch, then they'd look at your shoes, and then they'd ask you what kind of car you were driving.
Yeah.
And that's how they made their assessment. So yeah, I did that for a while, and then one day some gal I knew was working, and she said, with this PhD from UBC, and he's got this weird office down on Broadway, and we're doing this thing called Computer Bulletin Board, and it's going crazy, and I think he needs some help, and I know you know about technology. Come down and check it out. I didn't know what it was. I think that would have been 96, 97 later on. And it was a Computer Bulletin Board, but he was trying to hook up with a 28K modem to the very beginning of the internet. So I went to one of their staff meetings. It was just crazy. I mean, it's just a room with, he was still being a UBC professor, and he had a little chalkboard and was trying to tell them about fiber optics and this and that and the other. And I just looked at it as business opportunity. I said, this is huge. This is electronic communication and digital and linked with information and advertising. And I said at that meeting, I said, you can't do this by yourself. You need millions of dollars right now. And the only way to do that is to turn this into a public company, which I had never done before. And of course, he didn't want to do that. He wanted to own the internet. And so I did. I just went to some venture capitalists I knew, and I said, we need to start an internet connectivity service, and raised a couple $1 million, and I was CEO of the company, and we went in a year. This was pre me ever having a personal computer. Wow. I bought my first laptop after I decided to start an internet company, and we named it Axion Internet, and was sort of neck and neck with us and Internet Direct in the beginning. And I grew that company from me to 50 employees in a period of 14 months or something. And then I went to the financiers and the investors, and I said, we need to take this onto a bigger exchange and get a lot more